Civil war and the confrontation now between Madrid and the Catalan separatists here in Barcelona.
Badly treated, unfairly treated, the world watching but not doing anything.
The best way to do this is to ride this horse till I can't ride it anymore.
I know the rules, the rights of Spain, but I think it is the most important is to recognize the opinion or the attitude of the Catalan people about this feeling of this national feeling of Catalonia.
Catalan nationalism has a long history. It was a key factor in the Spanish Civil War of the 1930s, and there are lots of echoes to the Spanish Civil War and the confrontation now between Madrid and the Catalan separatists here in Barcelona. The government in Madrid at the moment is trying to impose direct rule on Catalonia. It isn't the first time that's happened. In 1933, on the eve of the Spanish Civil War, a right-wing elected government in Madrid tried the same thing, closed down the regional parliament, arrested Catalan separatists and actually executed some of them. Now, even though there's some echoes and some parallels one can draw with the confrontation now between Madrid and Barcelona, there are also differences.
I think it's going to be civil disobedience. The Catalan side, the independence movement, is very focused on avoiding any kind of violence.
Catalan nationalism back in the 1930s was driven by the working class. Nowadays it isn't. The working class are rather worried about a break between Catalonia and Spain and what it may do for them in terms of an economic impact.
I know that we are strong together, and I think that because of all this problem we had with the economy, the crisis and all this years ago, we really have to stand together now.
It's the middle classes, the more prosperous classes, who are trying to go for a break from Spain. They resent, they say, giving so much money and so much of their resources to Madrid. This is a very successful economic region. And so there's a whiff of indulgence in some ways to the struggle on the Barcelona side with Madrid.
If the pro-independence parties stay together, as they have claimed they will, there's probably a very low likelihood that the Spanish government has any enforcement capacity.
How this plays out in the next few weeks and months is very hard to tell. There's some people who say Catalonia is so distinctive from Spain that it will be natural for it to break away. It has a different language. But some of the cultural differences are not so sharp. And over the years, the Spanish, the Castilians and other nationalities in Spain and the Catalans have intermarried. But how this plays out will have not only a fundamental effect on the future of Spain, it will also have repercussions for Europe. European leaders are very worried that Catalan nationalism will encourage other nationalist groups, other minority groups, to also want to break away from their current countries, from their current governments. This is Jamie Dettmar in Barcelona.
Kurdish people in the Middle East share a common culture, language, and history. And that history includes abuses like mass forced disappearances, economic and social marginalization, displacement crises, and sometimes massacres. Kurdish people here also share a region which spans the borders of Iraq, Iran, Turkey, and Syria. And the central governments of those countries, along with their international allies, are, as you can imagine, nervous about Kurdish separatist movements. For example, separatists in Turkey have been waging an armed insurgency against the central government for more than 30 years. I'm Heather Murdoch, and I'm reporting from Ain Issa in northern Syria, where issues like independence and self-rule are reshaping the region. This part of Syria is known as Rojava, which is semi-autonomous, which means it is governed by Kurdish authorities and protected by a Kurdish-led military, but it is still part of the country of Syria. So we asked people here the other day if they want full self-rule, like their neighbors in Kurdistan region of Iraq. Some of the people said no, they do not, but they were still celebrating on the streets in September when an overwhelming majority of Iraqi Kurds voted yes to independence. Here in Rojava, authorities are taking a far more conservative approach to deepening their independence by establishing stronger government entities and holding elections. But people here in this region are talking about the ideas of unity and stability versus the merits of the ideas of independence and freedom. The problem is, no one can quite figure out how can one party in a conflict have all of those things without taking them away from someone else.
What we are seeing is an increase in the intensity of separatist movements, not necessarily their proliferation. Separatist movements tend to be incredibly persistent over time, so they die down in terms of their intensity, but they don't go away. So rather than seeing more and more movements, I would say that we're seeing movements that pre-existed become more intense and more demanding. It certainly seems that one successful movement would catalyze others to be more assertive. And research has shown that these movements are actually tightly networked and that they communicate with each other and they know what strategies separatist movements in other areas are employing and what's working. So I would say that the United States is generally consistent with the international community on this. States across the board respect the territorial integrity of other states. It's part of the system that lets states come together and cooperate. So this principle of territorial integrity and preserving territorial integrity is very important, and the United States as a principle tends to support it. And we've seen them do that both in Spain and in Iraq in the last month. When there's deviation, there are good reasons. There are also exceptions that we make in the context of conflict and for the purposes of peacemaking. So our support for secessionist movements, for instance, in South Sudan or in Kosovo, those specifically grew out of fighting wars and making peace. So the best examples are ones where you have mutual agreement in advance to dissolution. So cases like the Czech Republic and Slovakia, or like Serbia and Montenegro. Brexit is responding to similar global stimuli as other secessionist movements. Specifically when we look at Spain and Iraq, but also we've had secessionists in Cameroon and Nigeria that have been active. We have West Papua has been active in the same time period over the last 6 to 8 weeks. So it's really a global phenomenon. Central states are doing a poor job in managing demands for greater cultural rights and managing economic disparity. Central states respond to separatist movements as if they would. So central states that have more than one separatist movement, like in Spain, as you point out, they've got Basques and they've got the Catalans. And they're more likely to crack down on the Catalans so that the Basques don't take encouragement. This is not only a European phenomenon. This is a global phenomenon, and in this time period, this last 6 to 8 weeks, we've seen assertive separatists all over the world, right? So including in Cameroon and in Nigeria. Russia is a really interesting case here. They are the main global sponsor of both separatist movements and nationalists, extreme nationalist parties. And that conference that you mentioned was the second in a series. They had secessionists from all over the world, including from Texas and California. States are refusing to negotiate and rather addressing these demands for separatism with force. I think that's as much part of the problem as these claims against the state are. I think we would go farther by opening dialogue and encouraging dialogue.
Skateboarding came into my life when I was around 16 years old. This skateboard right here is the passport to a global community.
I'm Patsy Widakuswara. I've been at VOA for 12 years. So almost 20 years ago, my friends and I from college, we started the first Indonesian debating society. We started debating internationally, and I found out that I liked it, and I'm pretty good at it. Debating paved the way for me to become a journalist because it was in one of these competitions where one of the judges, who's a big television producer in Indonesia, she saw me and then tracked me down after I graduated and offered me a job, and the rest is history. Between debating and journalism, there's a lot of similarity. You have to be able to look at an issue from different angles and then absorb the information and present it in the most effective manner. I like it here because I can be independent. Back home, there is censorship, first from the government, and then there's commercial pressures for ratings. But here, all we need to rely on is the VOA Charter, and I love my job. I can't imagine being anything other than a journalist.
My name's Carla Babb, and I work the Pentagon beat. That access helps me to do better stories. Every day it's my responsibility to collect all of the defense news. It keeps our VOA viewers informed. I get to travel all across the globe. Anything that's defense related and how to protect and keep people safe, that's where I'll go. So it's never a dull moment at the Pentagon. My name is Carla Babb. This is my beat.
Being a refugee is much more than a political status. It is the most pervasive kind of cruelty that can be exercised against a human being. You are forcibly robbing this human being of all aspects that would make human life not just tolerable but meaningful in many ways.
According to the documentary Human Flow, over 65 million people in the world today have been forcibly displaced from their homes. Using cameras attached to drones, Ai Weiwei films humanity's movement from up high.
Human flow as always happens in the human history. It's, in many cases, it's part of our humanity and our civilization.
But the social anomaly of our times, says the filmmaker, is the effort by countries to stem that flow by preventing refugees from crossing borders and integrating into new societies. After a harrowing sea voyage and days of walking, many refugees from the Middle East make their way to northern Greece, only to be stopped on its border with Macedonia.
Over 70 borders are built up their fences and walls, and forbidden any refugee to pass through. So by doing that, they really not only stopped the lifeline of those refugees to trying to find a safe place, even just temporarily across the border and go to another location, but also put them in extremely dangerous condition.
2 months old and born here, but he didn't have any vaccination, no showering facilities. The hygienic situation is very bad.
Ai's look at the refugee crisis is as intimate as it is global.
داخل دریای دیدیم است. این خانمش جنازه شمیجه است. این بچهش جنازه شمیجه است امیاله. این دخترک شمیجه است. این بچه‌ک شام در دریاست. این برادرم سخی احمد است.
Human Flow shows masses fleeing wars, religious persecution, and environmental disasters. Ai Weiwei warns if we don't save those people from displacement, entire generations, born without identity, prospects for a better life for a country, will be vulnerable to extremism and radicalization.
Those people, those child, when they grow up, they only see how their parents being badly treated, unfairly treated. The world watching but not doing anything.
کجا برم زندگیمو شروع کنم؟ نمیشه توی اینجا بشینم زندگی کنم. چند روز بخوام اینجا بتونم زندگی کنم.
To see a real group of people come down is very different. You see the children, the women, and you see those elderly people, and they're tired. They're frightened. You know, there is a question about our humanity today and what kind of society we think the world is leading to, and what kind of future, you know, our children, you know, how they understand, you know, very essential values to really be tolerant or to give people a necessary help. What kind of image would remain in their mind? This is very hard to answer.
Penelope Pulu, VOA News, Washington.
One of the things I'm the most proud of is being the first skateboarding envoy for the US government. We worked with the embassy in the Netherlands to engage the Syrian refugees who'd been granted asylum, and for some of those kids it was the first time they ever got to see skateboarding up close, and they all became immediate parts of the skateboarding community. I am the first professor of skateboarding and action sports here in the US, especially at a major university, USC. I've been studying skateboarding in my undergrad and then my master's program, which is in public diplomacy, and looking at how skateboarding can be used as a tool for cultural diplomacy. So when it came time to bring the class together, they knew that I'd been working out in the field in Cuba and Brazil and South Africa, and that we were trying to find new ways to engage youth all over the world. Cuba Skate is our nonprofit that's based in DC and here in LA, and what we do is we bring boards back and forth to the kids that are in Cuba, and we also promote educational exchange between the skaters that are here, skaters globally, and the skaters that are in Cuba. One of the first things that skateboarding teaches you is how to persevere. If you fall down, you get back up and you work on things until you feel you've completed them. The other thing that skateboarding teaches you is to build a family and to build a community. That's amazing because most sports don't do that. One of the things that people don't realize is that skateboarding was very, very hard for me when I first got started. I didn't have access to money to buy lots of skateboards, so I had to literally piece together boards from parts all over the building. For me, it's something I fought to do my whole life. My mom actually didn't want me to skate when I first got started because she was worried that maybe I would get hurt or something would happen to me. Things have gone along really well, and she's always supported me and always loved everything I've got done in skate. The skateboarding diplomacy project that we did with the Netherlands was so successful that the State Department has asked me to decide what other countries we should work on. So we're creating a plan right now to take skateboarding globally as an envoy. Skateboarding to me is freedom, it's family, it's a way of life.
The best way to do this is to ride this horse till I can't ride it anymore.
Rocks with a common theme at two of the national park sites Micah Meyer visited in Idaho. At the City of Rocks National Reserve in southern Idaho, rock climbers of all ages come to test out their skills on the granite peaks, which range from 10 to almost 200 meters high.
Remember, you want to keep as much of your foot on the rock as you can.
And below the towering spires, smaller rock formations of various shapes and sizes dot the vast landscape, jutting from the ground, seemingly out of nowhere. The rocks were once buried underground, but erosion over millions of years exposed them, creating the surreal landscape. Micah enjoyed a scenic hike to one of the reserve's most popular sites.
Behind me is Window Arch, easily the most interesting rock formation I've seen here at City of Rocks National Reserve.
Window Arch is a great example of weathered granite, a result of the powerful forces of nature which create beautiful, graceful forms. Heading north, Micah went in pursuit of more rocks at Craters of the Moon National Monument and Preserve. With its massive lava flows and islands of cinder cones, the site resembles the surface of the moon. Micah hiked up the park's iconic Inferno Cone.
I'm basically just walking on a bunch of cinders, former magma that are now rock.
That landscape is so similar to the surface of the moon that American astronauts used it as a testing ground in the 1960s to prepare for their lunar missions. Whether you're an astronaut, a mountain climber, or simply a lover of the great outdoors, these Idaho parks are proof that even rocks can be objects of timeless beauty. Julie Tabo, VOA News, Washington.
The guitars are a combination of four things. They're musical instruments, something to make a sound to make music with. They are art. You can see it in Vogue magazine. It's part of our heritage. They are complex tools for the musician to use to do their job.
There's about 250 people making guitars here. Make 10, 12,000 guitars a year here, and then we make, something like 18,000, 20,000 guitars in other factories outside of this country.
From start to high gloss finish, it's all made in America.
We are a proprietary company, so if you look at our guitars, the screws are our screws, the strap button's our design, the tuning peg is ours, the bridge is patented. All those things are what goes into making a PRS very different than a lot of other guitars.
They also have manufacturing operations in South Korea and Indonesia, and while it's cheaper to build outside the United States, they keep this factory running and its luthiers employed.
The best thing that this company ever did for the world was provide 250 people jobs and health insurance. And I thought to myself, well, that's true in a way, I think there's a real obligation on the part of the company to try and take care of the people that took care of the company, right? So I could quit today and go back in a little shop and make guitars and make a really good living. But then I would let all the people down that have given their lives to this place. That's not going to work. I mean, the best way to do this is to ride this horse till I can't ride it anymore.
The amount of detail that goes into the hand working of these guitars is absolutely amazing. That something like a machine can't handle, something that a machine can't tell.
We take what happened in the past from the great guitar makers and we use the best of it, and then what we think we can make better, we make better. So it's a conglomeration of the best things of our industry in combination with how we've innovated. Look, if you steal from one place 20 times, you're stealing. But if you steal from 20 places, it's research. It's okay. If you sit on the couch with a magic guitar, you're in no pain. And when you put it away, there's no hangover. That's really good drugs. That's just all flavors are good.
Everybody wants to be remembered, and that's something that's much easier to do if you're wealthy.
Welcome to Biltmore. It was built in the 1890s by George Vanderbilt, an heir to the railroad fortune amassed by his grandfather. The manor has 255 rooms and 65 fireplaces. Its opulence was a sign of the times, an era where the very rich owned a third of the nation's wealth, while 40% of Americans lived in poverty. George Vanderbilt wanted to impress visitors, not only with the building but also its contents. Visitors today appreciate his efforts.
Just speechless when we drive up to it. You just see the size and that somebody lived here and the amount of work and craftsmanship to build a place like this. It's absolutely amazing.
This is the Banquet Hall. It has 7-foot story-high ceilings and Flemish tapestries from the mid-1500s. This is where the Vanderbilts would have big dinner celebrations, anything formal.
Biltmore now hosts concerts and exhibitions. Visitors can tour the many rooms filled with books and works of art, and architectural details such as this winding staircase.
I think people just don't spend the time doing it anymore. It's easier just to mass manufacture houses than it is to build something unique.
It's good to look back to see what life was like back then, but it also kind of is a way of looking at the classes and how the upper class definitely had the wealth and the control of everything, but yet the lower classes struggled.
The manor reminds visitors of a time that was hard on many, but very glamorous for the select few. Masha Morton, Mike Maisoradze, VOA News, North Carolina.
The Library of Congress is another grand American building, a bizarre structure filled with not just books but sculpture and mosaics.
When a visitor comes into the Library of Congress, we're immediately into this huge, great hall, and for our visitors who are blind or have low vision, they don't get to experience that the same way.
We're going to be coming straight ahead here and then turning to your left.
The library has commissioned teachers trained to offer visual descriptions.
So we're able to, through visual description, describe the types of materials that they're seeing.
Mosaics can be done out of glass.
The building, the architecture that we have around, and specifically to go into some of the artwork.
They also give a touch history tour, which includes feeling a sculpture of Thomas Jefferson and getting a physical sense of one of America's founding fathers.
With the library, everything that we have is behind a case or behind a glass enclosure, some maps that we can't interact with. So we have brought materials specifically for this tour. So on the floor, there's a mosaic. So we were able to get pieces of the mosaic floor that people could put in their hands.
This inclusiveness allows Kevin Bryan, who is sight impaired, to appreciate the art and craftsmanship on display.
There's a greater understanding of how people learn differently, regardless of whether it's mental, physical, or just general personality. So I think the concept of accessibility is growing, and therefore there's much more inclusivity in this process. It gave me much better perspective. I see through hearing, and I have a vivid perspective in my mind of my experience here today.
It is a moment every aspiring baseball player strives for. That first major league appearance.
My name is Eva Marcan. I started working at VOA in 1998. We're originally from former Yugoslavia, so we moved to America right when the war started. In 91, when I came here, in class I would always spend a lot of time doodling with wall art, graffiti. It opened up the door to exploration for a teenager, but you can definitely come out and do a piece like this or do a piece like this, and it would be recognized, and you also tell a story through it. I connect art with journalism because it's a story that changes. And it's not just a view, it's not just a personal perspective, it's a story, and it's a story to be told, and that's it.
I'm Jim Malone, and I work the political beat. I cover what drives the political issues in the United States, what voters think, what drives the candidates, how public opinion shifts on one issue or another. It keeps you in touch with the American people and where they want the country to go. It's a great way to get a window on what's happening in the United States. I'm Jim Malone, and my beat is U.S. politics.